At the end of the topic, you will be able to discuss the development of the ancient civilizations, describe the Nile Valley civilization of Egypt. Since 4000 BC, man lived in urban societies by the collective knowledge and skills acquired from the preceding thousands of years and the new discoveries of metals. In human history, the arrival of this period is known as the Metal Age Revolution. It resulted in the emergence of the first civilizations known as River Valley civilizations. In the River Valley civilizations, the effective use of metal implements for cultivation, weapons, and domestic use were famous. The Bronze Age civilizations which flourished in different parts of the world between 5000 BC and 500 BC were the Indus Valley civilization or the Harappan culture from 3250 to 2750 BC, the Tigris-Euphrates civilization of Mesopotamia, the modern Iraq from 3500 BC to 1000 BC, the Nile Valley civilization in Egypt from 4000 to 500 BC, Huangbo or the Yellow River civilization in China from 3500 to 3000 BC. Among the four civilizations of the Bronze Age, the civilization of Egypt, which thrived in the Nile Valley, is believed to be the oldest for which records are available. The archaeologists were able to find huge pyramids, the mysterious sphinx, ruins of temples and tombs, furniture and clothing, and well-preserved human bodies or mummies. Mummies are dead bodies that have been treated with special oils and wrapped in long, narrow pieces of cloth to prevent it from decaying, especially in ancient Egypt. Egypt is known as the daughter of Nile. Herodotus, the Greek historian, called Egypt the gift of Nile. The Egyptian civilization was at its height of glory about 5,000 years ago. There were numerous tribes in ancient Egypt. The numerous tribal chieftains or nomes gradually emerged into two kingdoms under strong kings. Later, the whole of Egypt was united under one pharaoh. The pharaohs were absolute monarchs. The pharaohs were considered descendants of the sun god. They lived in luxury. The pharaoh was a chief justice, chief priest, and chief commander, and after his death, his body was preserved in the form of a mummy. He had the authority to declare wars and sign treaties. Thutmose I and Thutmose III were the foremost among Egyptian kings of the period. Emperor Thutmose III was known as the Napoleon of Egypt. The three classes of the Egyptian society were the aristocracy, the middle class, and the slaves. The slaves were forced to work for the construction of pyramids, temples, canals, and dams. In the social ladder, the king and his lords held the top position. The priests and the nobles were a privileged class and lived a comfortable life. Merchants, artisans, and small landowners formed the middle class. The position of women was a unique one. They practiced monogamy and endogamy. Agriculture was the main occupation. They introduced the process of irrigation by digging canals and basins. They knew the art of making articles of metal, particularly of bronze. Shipbuilding was an important trade, along with pottery and cloth weaving. Internal and external trades were highly developed. Navigation in the river Nile and the sea was their main means of transportation. In this topic, you have learnt River Valley civilizations were the first civilizations among the ancient civilizations. The Bronze Age civilizations flourished between 5000 BC and 500 BC. Egyptian civilization thrived in the Nile Valley and was the oldest civilization. The numerous tribes in Egypt eventually united under one pharaoh. The three classes of the Egyptian society were the aristocracy, the middle class, and the slaves. At the end of the topic, you will be able to discuss the contributions of the Egyptian civilization in the fields of religion, art and architecture, writing, trade and commerce. Religion. The political, economic, intellectual and social life of the Egyptians was dominated by religion, and they practiced polytheism. Sun god Amen or Aten or Ra was their main god, and the other important gods and goddesses were Osiris, Isis and Horus. The images of these gods were carved out of big stones, and they were shaped as partly human and partly animal. They believed that dead would be brought back to life after a trial by God. This religious belief encouraged those to preserve dead bodies by mummifying them and to construct pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed for the pharaoh Cheops or Khufu, is 481 feet. Mummy means the preserved and embalmed dead body inside the tomb. It was kept in a wooden coffin and it was sealed in a stone box known as the sarcophagus. Inside the tomb, food, clothing and furniture were kept for a comfortable journey of the pharaoh to the next world. Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, popularly known as Akhenaten, enforced monotheism, with Aten as the only god to be worshipped by the people. He declared himself against wars. Art and architecture. The earliest origin of art, architecture, and sculpture was in Egypt. The most beautiful examples of their architecture and art were the pyramids and the Sphinx. The Sphinx is a mythological animal with the head of a man and the body of a lion. Herodotus, a Greek historian, wrote that 30,000 men worked for 20 years to complete the pyramid of Pharaoh Cheops or Khufu at Giza. A pyramid is a large stone structure with a square base and walls with three sides that meet at a point on the top. They were tombs of the pharaohs. In the ancient world, the pyramids were one of the 7 wonders of the world. Another excellent work of architecture was the temple at Karnak. The pillared hall of the temple was the most excellent part of the temple. It was 170 feet in length and 138 feet in breadth. Writing. Hieroglyphics was the ancient writing of Egypt. It meant holy picture in Greek language. Pictograph was the first system they used, and there were more than 2,000 pictograph symbols. Writing materials used by them were papyrus, reed pen, ink, and ink pot. Egyptian literature was mainly religious in nature and comprised books of the dead and coffin texts. The secrets of eclipses, movement of planets, and the solar calendar were discovered by them. They calculated the days between floods in the Nile and fixed the solar year with 365 days. The cycle of zodiac was discovered by the Egyptians and was a great contribution to the science of astronomy and astrology. They prepared star tables and made tremendous progress in the field of medicine and surgery. They were the first to introduce a decimal system and to develop geometry, trade, and commerce. The main occupation of the Egyptian was agriculture. The Nile Valley was a center of great economic activity. They traded with Nubia and Sudan in ivory, gold, ebony, ostrich feathers, and slaves. They imported spices, scents, colors, fine cloth, and sandal from India. They learnt the art of making jewelry, glassware, and furniture. The world is deeply indebted to them not only for their contribution to the civilization, but also for their arts and crafts. In this topic, you have learnt the political, economic, intellectual, and social lives of the Egyptians were dominated by religion. The oldest origin of art, architecture, and sculpture was in Egypt. Egyptian civilization made tremendous progress in the fields of medicine and surgery. They were the first to introduce a decimal system and to develop geometry. The world is deeply indebted to them not only for their contribution to the civilization, but also for their arts and crafts. At the end of this topic, you will be able to discuss the Sumerian civilization of Mesopotamia, understand their political and social life, appreciate the cuneiform script. Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian cultures were part of the Mesopotamian civilization. The civilization flourished in the region between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Mesopotamia means land between two rivers, Meso means in between, and Potam means rivers. The Euphrates River is 2,760 kilometers long, and the Tigris River is 2,000 kilometers long. Both the rivers have their sources in the mountains of Armenia. The valley between these two rivers is the shape of a crescent, and the region is called the Fertile Crescent. In the Old Testament of the Bible, the Garden of Eden is thought to have been located within this region. Numerous tribes were attracted to this region for the fertility of the soil and availability of water. The Mesopotamian civilization was very complex in nature. Sumerians means black-headed, and according to the historians, they did not belong to the Aryan or Semitic races. The Sumerians settled in the southern part of Mesopotamia. They followed the city-state form of government. Priests, kings, or patrices ruled over these city-states. Ur, Larsa, Kish, Lagash, Eridu, and Ammon and Ammon were the most important city-states. They had no physical barriers to prevent immigrations, so the Semitic king of Akkad, Sargon I, conquered their kingdom. King Samu Abu made Bab-ilu as the capital of Amorites. The capital was popularly known as Babylon. Hammurabi was the powerful king of Amorite or Babylonians, and his reign were known as the Golden Age of Mesopotamia, as there was all-round development. Mesopotamia was conquered by the Assyrians, and they were cruel and believed in terror activities. Assur and Nineveh were the chief centers of power of the Assyrians. Later they were conquered by the Chaldeans. During the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean Empire reached the zenith of its prosperity. Hanging Gardens, which is considered as one of the wonders of the ancient world, was built by him. A great civilization in Mesopotamia flourished for a long time due to the combined contribution of the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. The society was divided into farmers, laborers, and slaves. Social regulations were based on religion, and temples were centers of education. Women held an honored position. Agriculture was highly developed. They carried trade with people of the Indus and Nile valleys. Initially, the Babylonians traded through the barter system, and the city of Babylon was the center of international commerce. Cuneiform script was a system of writing with wedge-shaped letters that was developed by the Sumerians. They wrote on wet clay tablets and then baked and dried them. A large number of these clay tablets have been found. They used nearly 350 signs, and their writings were from right to left. Most of the books of this period described gods and their activities. Epic of Gilgamesh was one of the most famous books. In this topic, you have learned Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian cultures were part of the Mesopotamian civilization. The civilization flourished in the region between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. Hammurabi was a powerful king of Amorite, and his reign was known as the Golden Age of Mesopotamia. During the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean Empire reached the zenith of its prosperity. Social regulations were based on religion, and temples were the centers of education. Cuneiform script was a system of writing with wedge-shaped letters that was developed by the Sumerians. At the end of the topic, you will be able to explain the contributions of the Sumerian civilization of Mesopotamia. An amazing progress was seen in the fields of science, astronomy, and medicine. To measure time, sundials and water clocks were used. Lunar calendar of 365 days divided into 12 months was introduced by them. The Sumerians divided the circle into 360 degrees. The ziggurat was used as an observatory. Ziggurats were huge structures built in the ancient Mesopotamian valley, having the form of a terraced step pyramid of successively receding levels. Planets like Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, and Mars were known to them. Ancient Chaldean astronomers Naburi and Kidinu made many contributions to the science of astronomy. Sumerians adopted units of 60 to count time. Sexagesimal system of counting was used by them. The concept of 7 days constituting a week also goes back to the days of Chaldeans. Religion played an important role in the Mesopotamian civilization. Marduk and his queen Nanshi were their main gods. The reproduction of plants and beasts was controlled by Ishtar, the mother of the gods. They worshipped Shamash, Nanar, and Tammuz. They built the ziggurats or tower temples. Their sculptures were inferior to those of the Egyptians. The greatest Babylonian ruler was Hammurabi. He was a famous warrior, conqueror, administrator, and builder. The first written code of laws in history, called the Code of Hammurabi, was brought out by Hammurabi, and hence he was called the world's first lawgiver. The code covered almost all aspects of a man's life, like debt, marriage, divorce, property, payment of taxes, etc. The laws were engraved in Semitic language of the Amorites on a piece of stone, at the top of which there was a scene representing Hammurabi receiving the laws from the sun god. The code contained 4 parts, namely a civil code, a code of procedure, a penal code, and a commercial code. The civil code recognized 3 classes of citizens: freemen, semi-freemen, and slaves. The second part dealt with courts, rules, and appointment of civil and religious judges. The punishment of crimes was fixed by the penal code. This law was based on the idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which is similar to the Mosaic law. The laws fixed prices and wages, organized trade, and fixed the rates of interest. These laws were engraved on a tall column of 2.5 meters high in cuneiform script and exhibited to the public. The 285 laws were arranged in a logical order. A distinct form of architecture was developed by the Mesopotamians. The notable features of their architecture were arches, tombs, and pillars. One of the wonders of the ancient world was the Tower of Babel, a ziggurat that was dedicated to the sun god. The ziggurat was about 200 meters in height and measured about 95 meters at the base. There is a mention of this monument in the Bible. In this topic, you have learnt the amazing progress in the fields of science, astronomy, and medicine during the Mesopotamian civilization. Religion played an important role in this era. The first written code of laws was the Code of Hammurabi. Hammurabi was called the world's first lawgiver. A distinct form of architecture was developed by the Mesopotamians.